Hello guys, how are you? And welcome back. And today we are going to discuss about Equity Bank, one of the most controversial banks in the country, and by market cap or the funds available, is the most liquid bank in Kenya at the moment, and even the second most liquid in Africa, or East Africa to be precise. But this bank has never been afraid of controversies. Customers in Equity Bank have always complained of money vanishing to the thin air, but the bank has always defended itself and reputation and always undermined claims that there is some internal stealing in Equity Bank. But in the recent time, or in the recent days, an explosive hellfire has broken out in Equity Bank. A hellfire like no other, and that will be the subject of this video. Equity Bank recently fired 200 employees in Kenya alone, amounting to over 2% of its total staff, not just in Kenya, but also in DRC, in Southern Sudan, in Uganda, and all other major subsidiaries in Africa. But this is not an isolated incident. Equity Bank and all its subsidiaries in Africa have faced what I can only call a systemic rot. A rot so big and widespread that I believe that you are going to be extremely disgusted by what I'm going to describe. So buckle up, because this is going to get wild ride. First and foremost, I'm going to start with the series of case that happened in Uganda. In a series of case in Uganda, the equity insiders working with the people outside, or the mobile phone operators, managed to swap several SIM cards and change PIN, and then proceeded to drain the bank, Equity Banks, of the affected victims. The incident led to the loss of 18.8 billion Uganda shillings. But what was the bank's response? And that is the most interesting part. The bank responded by slowing the investigations and even denied refunds to the affected victims. And the file contributed to the management scrutiny in Uganda and forced some internal reviews to be conducted in Equity. But outside, the customers or the victims were never compensated as necessary. And then in Kenyan bank fraud, or to be precise, debit card fraud, which led to the loss of $2.1 million in Kenya. So there was this scam in which customers who tried to withdraw money received an error of card is not present in the system. But the funds were fraudulently diverted to aspects to other bank accounts. And approximately 3,200 customers were affected in this scheme, and many reported unauthorized charges on their cards. Although 19 suspects were arrested in relation to this scam, most customers were not funded. And then, moving on to 4 billion card fraud, that also happened in Uganda. This is in Uganda shillings, and which 2 employees were found guilty or negligent. And the bank responded by placing trackers on accounts that drained these funds to try to recover the money. But there has never been publication of how the bank handled this, or how the victims were funded. And then again, another incident happened in Uganda, in which 65 billion Ugandan shillings was approved as loans to fictitious companies and even unqualified individuals. Suspects by their names include Muslime Julius, Nobius Erina, Tubine Crescende, Serewenge Fred, Asime Wycliffe, Mugunya Robert, Kato Fred, and Mukwea Ronald. The former managing director of Uganda, that is Onyango Kenneth, has remained under investigation since the loss of this 65 billion and has been replaced by another managing director. But we all know that this development is not healthy for the trust that will be exposed on this bank. Let me proceed to the Kenyan case where 387 million insider heist, where a rogue employee orchestrated unauthorized electronic transfer amounting to 387 million. The transfer was routed through different companies. An external compliance who were going by the name Geoffrey Kiragu, who posted as a real estate agent and helped to launder this money. Although Equity Bank detected the activity through monitoring tools and tried to recover the money, there is no clear investigation or clear publication of how the victims have been refunded. There was also another case of 1.5 billion paid off to M-Pesa fraud, in which an coordinated attack in equity system led to 7 unauthorized transactions in customers' accounts. So, there is one thing that I need you to understand here. I can go on and on about all these frauds, including suspects and internal crackdown that Equity have tried to portray, and the broader financial impact that it can have in Africa, and the trial or attempt by the bank to do the overhaul of the entire system and its strategic response. But the problem that I want us to discuss today is not what has happened. It is the effect that this particular problem have on Equity Bank. For years, there have always been people complaining in one way or the other in social media that they are mysteriously losing money in the Equity Bank. But the response has always been to frustrate these people and to make them move from one location to another, one bank account to another, one bank location to another, and then filing complaints. But there has never been a documentation on how Equity is responding to refunding these people who are affected. But this is not an isolated incident. Managing Director of Equity Bank have voiced concern at the moment that he's going to take some action. But these actions have always been taken after much damage has been done, which is almost irreversible. By all standards, I know Equity Bank is not going to take liability for all this money that has been moved from customers' account. And it has never been known historically for taking action when such situation arises. I remember in one incident, a woman or a lady described how her father had a retirement plan or money saved for retirement, drained all of it out of his account. And then his account was closed subsequently. At this point now you can understand what is happening, because these people are operating malware. They are inside Equity, installing malware in system, authorizing transaction using signatures which is not their own. And through this, they have been able to move a lot of money from people's account, unauthorized movement from your account. So let me ask you a question. With all these investigations and all this expose, do you think that you are safe with your money in Equity Bank? This firing of 1,200 people or employees from Equity Bank means that 9% of the bank employees were complicit in the theft or moving of money from people's bank accounts to their own bank accounts. Although there has been a controversial claim in social media that an employee had been fired for just 200 shillings, but people rarely understand the whole picture. In fact, firing 14,000 employees in Equity Bank could have gained people or could have been more trustworthy than firing 98%. Because you might not know who is responsible and who is not responsible. In a case where there is a systemic rot, like in Equity Bank at the moment, it is almost impossible to correct this rot by just pruning some section of it or some section of people who are complicit, and yet leaving the trust will return. I don't know what you think about these guys, but I really don't feel good about the progress or the response that Equity Bank has had over the past years when cases like this arise, or how it has been slow in reacting to major scandals, especially when it involves the employees moving money away from people's bank account, or employees requiring or requesting for some fraudulent money or some charge for them to approve your loan. And in most cases, those who end up having their loan approved are not people who are qualified of those loans. This is like a private company operating like a government corporation. If it was a government corporation, then could have been a little bit more careful in what we are saying. But now if it is a private company like Equity Bank, I know it's time to move your money out. That's it guys for today. Until next time, bye.